Hey guys, so another day, another video, and it's raining. Joyous day, but I'm safe here under the roof of the bus station. So let's get into it. Today we are going to talk a little bit about health checks. We are going to talk about some stuff that I've learned from working with health check, what they are, stuff of that nature, just some considerations that I think you should have with you when you set up health checks. Now, what in the world is a health check, the juniors are asking? Well, you see guys, when you progress from the stage of having a very basic application that just maybe just you are using, and you start getting some traction and you start to have to consider things such as uptimes, and you're forced to consider things such as maintenance. Basically, this is usually how it goes. So it usually starts out where you start at the proof of concept level and you just hack things together until you get something off the ground. And once you get something off the ground and somebody is willing to invest in it, you see a growth to your application and you see users starting to use it. Now, in the very beginning, the focus isn't so much on maintaining that system because the system is still very small. But you will get to a magical moment where you will see outages, you will see that you have issues with deployment of code, and you see that you have issues with basically the application crashing. Now, what's interesting about this is that in order for you to solve this, you actually have to, and this is kind of something that you should take this with you. Over time, you spend more and more time just making sure that the existing product is working. This is just a natural thing, guys, and this is something that you need to make sure that your boss knows, because some non-technical people have it in their heads that you can always like count on that the application is just going to scale by itself and that you can simply invest more and more time into development. That's not true. You have to invest time into making sure that the system is working. Now, the most common first step to ensure that the application is working correctly is a health check. And when you have a health check and you have logging, that's going to keep you sane or keep the application fairly healthy for a long time. And a health check, all it is that you have some script or job or computer or something that pings your application, that tries to connect to your server, and that's all it does. All it does is to make sure that if I try to connect to the server, I get a response. That's it. And the reason why you want to have that is because you want something to keep on checking that your application is up and running. And the reason why you want that to happen is because if something goes wrong, let's say that the system goes down, you have a code issue or something critical happens and your users can't access your application, you want to have a notification system that sends you an email or notifies you somehow. Depending on rules, of course, you don't want to send an email for every time it can't connect. Usually you set a threshold of a few times because you can have connection issues and you don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night for like one failed connection issue. But basically that's the mentality of the health check. The health check is just there to kind of simulate something that's trying to connect and make sure that that works. Now, the thing that you need to consider here, which I learned the hard way, is that the easiest health check you can make is a health check that simply, you have an endpoint called /health check, and all that does is that, okay, it takes in a request and it sends back a response. That's it. That's the easiest health check that you can make. And for the most part, that's going to be a very good first stop for you to just make sure that the server is running. However, I have found that very often this is not good enough. And the reason why it's not good enough is because some application structures are more complicated than that. Let me just explain it. So I've worked in several projects where you have different steps before you actually hit the endpoint or until you hit the end system. For example, when you have a distributed system where you might have a server that serves up the actual web application and then you have backend APIs and systems that they connect to and so forth, the problem becomes a little bit more tricky, because what happens if your health check is on the web application server and that works, but the connection between the web application server and the API isn't working? Maybe the API is down. You don't know that if your health check is only responding in the front-end server. And then you're going to tell me, well, of course, Fredrik, I'll have one health check for the API, and then I will have one for the front-end server. And yeah, sure, you can do that too. But all of a sudden, you start to kind of think about, all right, do you have a load balancer? Because if you have something like an Nginx load balancer, for example, then you have to check that too. Okay, so you're going to health check that, and then you're going to health check the backends, like the systems behind that, because and this is where people don't really understand like how things get so complicated very quickly, because the more things that are in your ecosystem, this is actually why the monolith is so beautiful. The monolith is a single entity. There's a lot of complexity with the monolith, but it's at least from a maintenance perspective very easy to do these sort of things. Because as I said, the more stuff you have, the more stuff you have to consider, and you have to make sure that, in this case, the health check is actually touching everything. Because if you forget something, as I said, you might be checking that the health of one service is up, but then you're forgetting about 3 other services. And when your user comes to your system and tries to access that API, it doesn't work. But you don't know, because your health check is just checking that the front-end server, for example, is actually working. Now, the way that I like to solve this problem, which I think is very useful, is that you have a health check that is a little bit smarter, that is trying to go for the holistic thing. So when you write say an integration test, the idea is that you simulate a user that is using your system. Now, a good health check, in my personal opinion, should be a very similar thing. What you're going for is to try, and this is not perfect by any means, but it increases the likelihood that you're going to find an issue. There are always these endpoints, or these places in the code where what I call, they are code hubs. They're usually the sort of place where almost all the different integrations and all the connections in the entire system kind of manifest into one single point. That's where you want your health check. You want to simulate, you want to have a place where all you do, like you can even create a fake one if you wanted to. I don't go that far, but you could. You could have an endpoint where you simply make sure that in that one request, that one health check request, you simply make a very trivial, easy attempt to talk to the different services that you have in your system, just to make sure that everybody is connected. Because if you have a distributed system, that's a very easy way for you to check that everything is up. Because if your entry point now goes to all the other places and just makes a database request, like get some data, or maybe you can even fake a real user, you now connected to all of the services in one health check. And that's actually what you're going for, because the health check is there to make sure that the system is running. So you must make sure that when you do the health check, you actually get the truth. Because if you, as I said, if you just do a 200 response on one server, you don't know if the system is working. You just know that that one service is working. So that's at least what I've learned, to try to figure out a way so that when you do the health check, you touch everything in the system, or that is reasonable, of course, so that you can get a understanding of whether or not everything is working. Because if that health check fails and you get a warning, you want it to fail because something in the system is not working correctly. Because what you're going for is to be notified if the users can use your system, if something is broken. That's the whole idea of the health check. Have a great day.